Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to be giving you a kind of a walkthrough and a rundown of the cookie fundraiser mini practice set problem that we're going to be working on in class this semester. And we're looking at the spring 2025 version here. If you're watching this at a later date, potentially this could be for a future semester, but generally speaking, the overall um, tasks and everything, the numbers might change a little bit. Maybe we'll tweak things just a small amount, but overall, unless whenever the project changes in any significant way, if this video is still up, it's still relevant. Okay, so we've got this word breakdown here of the project, and this is really an important paragraph here where it talks about the scenario. And so this project is essentially kind of just a role-playing experiment, kind of a hypothetical sort of fun, supposed to be fun, kind of a little a project, right? So case study, if you will, sort of thing. So here's the scenario. You are managing a bake sale for a club at the school, at your school. It's being held on the weekend. When the football team has home games, there's 5 home games. We're selling cookies in packages of 2 dozen, so 24 cookies per package. Selling price is $9.40. The packaging material costs 15 cents per package. We have kitchen staff, and we're paying them a direct labor cost for mixing and baking at $16.50 per hour. We have baking utensils and supplies for the entire season, costing $620. Before each game, the cookies would be prepared in a school kitchen for a fixed rental fee of $85, and a cleanup labor is paid for a fixed total of $55 per session. We estimate that 500 packages of cookies will be baked for each sale, and that 96% of them will be sold. We have alumni volunteers who receive no compensation selling half of the packages, and students who receive a commission of 25 cents per package are going to sell the other half. And we plan to run an advertisement in the school newspaper before all 5 games, with each advertisement costing $170. Okay, so that's important. Just all these factors are going to come into play, and we'll walk through here in a moment how at least I have provided a template. You can make your own template if you want, or use another analysis technique in Excel, but I have a template that you can work off of that hopefully you find valuable, and I will walk you through an example at least that I prepared that hopefully will point you in the right direction here and provide you that template so you don't have to do as much work unless you decide you want to. Okay, so here's our instructions. So we need to decide whether we want to do the research and budget work by ourselves or with others from the class. So again, you can work together, that's fine. You're welcome to work in teams of up to 3 students, but only for the budget work, not the written analysis. So there's a written analysis that's going to be at the end of the project, or just kind of the latter part of it, and that needs to be completed individually. Each student will turn in their own reports, the budgets, the written analysis. Everyone's going to have their own submissions. If you decide to work with a group, your title page will have the name of the students who completed the budget work, and in the report you will acknowledge those students who worked with you, but like I mentioned, each student will submit a separate and complete practice set. Okay, step 2. So let's go. The step 2 is to go to the internet and find a cookie recipe. Your recipe must have at least 5 ingredients, and your recipe will need to be copied into the practice set in full, including preparation descriptions, number of cookies the recipe creates, as well as baking time. And you can use your snipping tool here if you like. No links, so just highlighting the fact that we want you to bring in the actual recipe into your analysis. And I'll show you how I did that. You can do it separately or you can do it a little differently if you want. I mean, it kind of depends on what your recipe is or where you get it. You can use your snipping tool, which I use a lot, is kind of handy, or you can also just take a screenshot and paste it into your analysis, so on and so forth. So that is the recipe. Step 3, we're going to research the prices of the ingredients. We can actually go out and look at them if you want, but I would recommend just, looking online. You can find a lot of grocery information online, and we'll take a look at how that can be accomplished. Document where you found your costs in your analysis, and price full quantities as the materials are sold in the market, and do not change the base recipe quantities. So if we have to use 25 pounds of butter, for example, and we can only buy butter in 30-pound quantities, we're going to have to buy, we're going to have 5 pounds of residual unused butter, for example. So that's something to just look at and consider in the analysis. Step 4, or instruction 4, we need to develop your materials cost and document this work in your Excel budget file. Your budget work needs to describe the total direct material cost to make the cookies for an entire cookie sale. This involves converting things like 1 cup of flour for 24 cookies to the amount of flour and cost of flour for the entire sale. There's some hints here. To convert the recipe quantities, you can use an online conversion calculator. The way I'm going to show you all is utilizing some AI resources. I'll use ChatGPT and see if it kind of helps us get through that a little easier, so we can sort of add a AI component to the project and use that as a helper function for us as we work through. We want to break down our conversions from the recipe quantities to the quantities to be purchased, and using clear steps. I'll show you how I accomplish that in our Excel spreadsheet. Here's just an example of what we're going to kind of be doing in the spreadsheet anyway that I'll walk you through. And so if your recipe calls for 1.5 cups of flour, weighs 0.276 pounds per cup. And so if we need 266.4 pounds to make enough cookies, and you buy flour in 50-pound bags, how many bags do you need, so on and so forth. So that's what the template analysis Excel spreadsheet I'm going to have is going to be designed to help you calculate. And then just continuing that, we'll price the number of bags, can't buy partial bags. And this project originally, there's different online calculators, but like I said, I think AI is actually a pretty good tool, and hopefully this project will give you a little exposure to AI as well in a beneficial, productive way. Okay, step number 5, we're going to develop a budget for the 5 bake sales using Excel, your Excel budget file. So I have a template for you. I'll link into Canvas there. And then we're going to give the complete detailed budget amounts for each sale and the budget in total. You can use your own, Excel budget if you want, but I've got the one that you can just take and run with too. That's fine. Make sure your budget is complete. It will include details on expected income and expenses, expected net income. And then there's part of this project is just kind of being sort of creative and using your imagination to figure out direct labor calculations. Kitchen can be large and full of commercial ovens. Just describe the calculations in detail, and you can do extra research if you'd like. I wouldn't. It's not that we don't require you to do any extreme research on this project in terms of like how long does it take, but just a little bit of general analysis. This is another place where AI can be helpful as well. And then C, be sure that all items are labeled, make it understandable. Okay, so after we do all the Excel work and we figure out a budget with a net income calculation and all the expenses broken out, then we're going to do a little write-up and prepare an analysis of the efforts. And so we're going to have a title page. As I mentioned here, this is done separately by each student. I'm going to begin with an overview of the project, analyze the results, and suggest alternative courses of action that would improve on the success of the project. Again, this is very creative writing, focused. Make it somewhat realistic, but I want this to be a little bit fun. I have an example that I prepared while I was doing the project, and you can take a look at that. Don't copy my work exactly necessarily, but hopefully that will at least give you a starting point to be able to see what a developed analysis might look like. But I'm very open to you putting your own spin on it. My analysis is a little bit silly, and I try to make it kind of more on the fun side of things. If you want to make it very technical, that's okay too. Just put your own spin on it, and I'm excited to see what you all come up with. So we want to write the analysis to show that it's for the use of the current club faculty advisor and next year's bake sale manager. So we're going to use their names and titles in the report. And we can include their names on the title page for clarity. So I did that in my report, so you can kind of get an example, at least from what I did. The analysis should have at least 1,000 words, and this is in addition to the budget recipe conversion work. So that, for me, my analysis to hit, let me see how many words I came out to exactly. including, so there's the title page that I created, and then the total word count is, I have 1,100 words, which was 2 pages written in like pretty normal spacing and all that. So 2 full written pages basically should probably get you about 1,000 words. And you can do a word count in Microsoft Word. It's under the review tab in the little top ribbon thing. Look it up on YouTube if you're trying to, or Google it just to see how to do a quick word count. But it's super easy. You just push a button and it tells you how many pages, how many words, paragraphs, lines, etc. So what we care about there is words, obviously. Okay, within your analysis, like we said, make some suggestions for next year. So again, creative writing. This is really just up to you to sort of pretend that you actually did this, and there's not a lot of limitations on your outcome. I leave that up to you. It could be a success, it could be a failure. You could come up with, like I said, make it kind of funny, make it more serious. Use all the actual factors that we kind of described above in our scenario and the results that we'll get from our budgeting and analysis work. But I'm pretty open to leaving it up to you to talk about, to make up a scenario of how the project went, right? And from that scenario, kind of building in things that may have happened, you could just come up with on your own, be creative, and then also ways that we could kind of improve in the future. Okay, so think about, again, this is sort of along those lines. Have fun, be creative, include any additional items that might make your project outstanding. 10% of the grade is earned by adding something extra. So add your flair to it, and make it interesting. If you go above and beyond, to an extreme degree, and kind of develop I know I've had students ask me if they can kind of take this same format but make it a whole different scenario. As long as you include all the key variables and you basically follow the overall gist of the project, which is, you have certain labor costs and fixed costs, and then you have some sales that are happening, and you have some, labor and packaging, and you're figuring out, a number of different things to sell. I'm generally kind of open to you doing something on your own. You could change the scenario a little bit. Don't go too far off the, like I said, the gist of the project. Keep it within sort of what we're intending to accomplish with this, and make sure you still hit all the same items that would be analyzed here. But if you really do a great job and kind of think outside the box, I'm open to offering some extra credit as well. So keep that in mind. Okay, and then along with that, there's an assignment rubric. So there's a checklist somewhere down here. So warning about AI. So just so you know, was originally designed by a separate professor. So going off of, I've used AI a bit in this project, and I do think you should use it for some of the components here, but don't just go to AI and say, hey, this is my type, paste in the scenario and say, give me a whole thing, right? That's kind of cheating the system a little bit. And it's an AI violation kind of a thing. Now, like we said, use technology, use it wisely, apply it to the concepts. And like I said, I think there's some real value in using AI for certain parts of the project, but don't just take the scenario, paste it into ChatGPT, and then paste what ChatGPT says into an Excel or something, but in a Word document. Okay, so when you submit, you got title page, the recipe, the budget, the analysis, and you can upload multiple files, the grading rubrics there. And don't use prior semesters, that data changes, plagiarism isn't good. So cool. All right, well, that's an overview of the general instructions, etc. And so let's turn our attention now to the bake sale template, as I'm calling it here. And this is our Excel spreadsheet that we're going to be implementing for analyzing data, doing conversions, etc. So I'm now going to click over to that Excel. Okay, so now we're looking at the Excel template that I will have linked into Canvas for you to download. And so what I've essentially done in this Excel template is break out a tab for summary and budget. Here's our kind of financial budget results. Then I've got a tab you can paste in the mixing and baking instructions. And then we've got an ingredients tab where we can do all of our conversions and pricing. So with that said, I'll kind of walk you through completion of this, and you can adjust accordingly on your side. And so I've already snipped in, or I've got kind of pasted in a cookie recipe here that I'm going to use to walk you through the process. So I've got it in Word, or in text essentially. But if you want to just snip a recipe, I'll show you how that might look here. So if I search up sugar cookie recipe, for example, you have to sort through all the advertisements and text stuff and all that kind of thing. But you could snip here. So you could come in and instead of pasting the words in there, kind of like I had. Sorry, bear with me for 1 second. You could instead, just copy with the snipping tool, or there's other ways to bring in screenshots. You could just snip this in here. And this will be important for a couple of reasons. You're going to want to know and then I'll paste in the other part of make sure you get all the instructions, and the ingredients, etc. This will be important, depending on what cookie you choose, to be able to determine how long it's going to take, right, for the baking and all that kind of stuff. So prep time, cook time, 30 minutes, right, to make the 24 cookies. Here is where it says the yield. So take that, make sure you think about that when you're doing your analysis. This is for more of home baking. So again, this is not like an absolute science. It has to be perfect in terms of your analysis and your assessment of time that's going to need it for the bakers, and their hours, their dollars per hour that you're paying them, etc. But use that as a general guide. So you can paste that in that way. I've kind of taken this and more so from a text perspective, just pasted this in here, but it's got all of the details essentially broken out. The one thing actually, as I'm looking at this, maybe it didn't include initially, was the cook time actually on my text example. So I'm just going to leave this in here. These are insanely delicious. So I'm just going to paste that over here so we have some prep time. So just make sure you got all the information. Sort of, treat this like it was a real project and you're really trying to get all the information you need together to do something like this. That's kind of the goal of this project in general. Okay, so now we've got our recipe. We know what our ingredients are here. And so what we want to do at this point then is start to do our conversions. And so we can come over to our ingredients tab. And again, you can carry your pasting over. You can copy and paste your snip maybe onto this, so you've got it at hand and it's easy to see what your ingredients are. And so then you're going to come over and kind of, the way that this is designed, we're going to say all-purpose flour, and then we're going to say baking soda. We're just listing out the ingredients here: baking powder, unsalted butter, let's see, granulated sugar, a large egg, and vanilla extract. Okay, and then we're going to put in the number of cookies that we saw there. So for the instructions, the yield was 24. I had that here as well. So 24 cookies is the yield. And so again, this is where we're going to put in the actual amounts, and then we're going to have to go through and analyze those amounts in order to take it from from 24 cookies up to the amount of cookies that we're going to need for the whole project, which is a lot. You'll see here in a moment. Okay, so let's put our amounts in here essentially. So this is for the number. So I'll show you here. So if we're saying all-purpose flour, then we're going to need 2.75 cups. For baking soda, we're going to need 1 teaspoon. We're going to need half a teaspoon. For the baking powder, 1 cup. You need to put cups, it's fine. When it'll increase to be cups pretty easily, and it's good to have the same units because we're going to kind of carry those through. So, and then granulated sugar, 1.5 cups. 1 egg, and 1 teaspoon. Okay, so this would be all the ingredients that we need if we were making 24 cookies, right? And so then we can go through and divide. So 2.75 gives us 24 cookies. So let's divide that by the number of cookies to figure out how many cups of flour we need just for 1 cookie. And the way I'm going to click into my formula here, I'm going to click this C7, just click into that with your mouse cursor to get it in there, and then click F4, and it puts dollar signs around that cell reference, is what that's called. And then when you drag down, it'll drag down the thing you're dividing, but it'll leave the 24 as the denominator, right? So then easy, I'm just a little Excel, this is a little Excel skill for you. So see how it keeps it there, but it moves, the blue moves down, but the red stays the same, right? If you didn't have that, just to show you, as you drag down an Excel formula, it starts dragging down the red as well, so that you see how it keeps going down. But we want it to stay on that the whole time. So we just need to do the dollar sign to lock that reference there, and then when we do our formula down, that makes it easy. Okay, so we're saying for each individual cookie, we're doing 0.04 teaspoons essentially. So I'm just going to carry this units over. Oh wait, no, sorry. We're going to do a ramp up here to calculate how much we need. This is per cookie, but we want to know is how much we're going to need for all the cookies we're going to make, right? So let's pause at this point, go back to our summary and budget tab, and take a look back at our practice set scenario. And I've designed this kind of like data analysis section to just start listing out all the stuff that we know, and then it's there and we'll analyze it as we go. So from the scenario we were just looking at that was in the Word document, we can see that there's 5 home games. The cookies per package is 2 dozen, so 24 cookies per package. The number of packages that we're planning to sell is 500. And so if we multiply 500 packages times 24 cookies per package, that gives us 12,000 cookies that we need basically. So that's a lot of cookies. So that's where, and we'll finish filling this out, but we're going to come back to our conversion, and this is where we're going to need, I'm going to link it over to here and say we need 12,000 cookies, right? And so just real quick, let's finish this out. So here, let's let's do it like this. Let's go equals per cookie times 12,000 cookies, right? And again, just click in around that and hit F4. And so now we've got each individual cookie, right, times 12,000 cookies now, not 24. We need for 2.75 is 24, but now we're going to need a whole lot more. And this is just a spot to kind of carry this information over. Sometimes it's a little hard to see when you're dragging, so I just like to have it next to each other again. Carry this stuff through. So again, so we're going to need to make 12,000 cookies. Each 500 is per game. That's per game, 500 packages. So for each game, we're now going to need 1,375 cups of flour. We're going to need 500 teaspoons of baking soda, 250 teaspoons of baking powder, 500 cups of butter, so on and so forth. So this, and then we've just got kind of a check figure. I'll show you how we're going to use that later when we start carrying through. So a check figure is kind of a really important tool when you're working in Excel spreadsheets to make sure that things are carrying across and you're not missing something. So that's what that's there for. And I'll show you how we use it here in a little bit. But let's go back to our summary tab now and finish filling this out. So in the scenario, it said that we estimated that 96% will be sold. And then if we take the difference between the 100%, or 1 is also 100%, then 4%, right, adds up to 100. So 4% we estimate unsold. So what that means is the number of packages sold, then just multiplying the total packages of 500 times the 96%, we estimate 480 will be sold, and then we can multiply the 4% times 500 to say 20 packages will, didn't mean to do that. Sorry, 20 packages will be remain unsold every game. Okay, and then it told us in this scenario that half of the packages will be sold by students and the other half will be sold by alumni volunteers. And so the percentage of the packages sold by students then out of the 480, right, not the 500, but the actual amount. Oh, sorry, that's the percent there, 50%. So 50% of the packages that are actually sold would be 240. So the students we're estimating they're going to sell 240 packages. Let's see, what else do we need? Okay, now the mixing, baking, and packaging time. So again, this is use your imagination a little bit. I actually used AI in this effort as well. So if we know this information, then I went to AI and said, hey, ChatGPT, how long do you think it might take to bake, mix, and package 12,000 cookies, right? And so it'll give you sort of a rough starting point. Is it 2 weeks or is it 2 days? And so I did a little bit of that, did a little bit of research there, and what I came up with is that we would be able to do this in about 2 days of production, 2 full 8-hour days, and so 2 times 8, 16 hours per employee. I estimated that we would have 2 employees for and again, these are creative, be creative here as much as you want. Depending on the type of cookies you pick, that might change things. And then that basically the 16 hours kind of conveys down into 2 days per employee, right? With 2 employees working. So that's what I came up with. Again, this is, open to your interpretation and imagination there. Selling price in the scenario, it said it was $9.40 per package. So we'll put that in. And then we're down into like the expense part, and I kind of separated these out so they sort of line up with the categories. So selling prices here lining up with our revenue, and then expense detail is aligned with the expense line items. Okay. So again, back to our scenario on that word in the instructions, it tells us that the packaging material is 15 cents per package. The direct labor cost is $16.50 per hour. We'll have a one-time cost of $620 for the baking utensils and supplies. It's our fixed cost for one time. Kitchen rental fee is $85. The cleanup fee is $55. The student commissions is $0.25 per package, and the advertising cost is $170 per game. So now we've kind of got these factors, just all listed out here. And we can now, link to those things. I just like doing it this way because it makes it, at least in the way I like to organize things and use Excel, just listing out all the things we know is a helpful starting point for me to get my mind wrapped around an analysis of how to approach a problem. So that's kind of why I've set it up that way. And we'll come back to development of our budget here in a moment. But what we need to do is to go through and actually do the conversions now And again, you don't have to pick sugar cookies. Maybe I should have made that point earlier. This is up to your do something other than sugar cookies is what I would recommend, because I don't want you just copying my work here down necessarily. So pick something else that is sugar cookie, or not sugar cookie, cookie related. Keep the ingredients low, and that's honestly one way to use AI as well, is to maybe go into AI and say, I need a cookie recipe that has 5 to 7 ingredients. I would recommend no more than 7. I only have 7 lines here, and it starts getting a little bit cumbersome when you have lots and lots of ingredients. I initially tried to do this project with one that had 15 ingredients and frosting, and the whole thing became a real pain in the butt. So I changed it to just be 7 ingredients, relatively simple. Let me switch over to Chat GPT right now, actually, and I'm curious now to look with you all, sort of these ways. So I'm going to click over to that screen now. Okay, so I'm using Chat GPT. There's other AI tools out there as well. But I'm just going to go ahead and insert here and say, can you please give me examples of cookies that have 7 or less total ingredients? Let's see what it says. Okay, so now we got peanut butter cookies. Ooh, look at that. It's real simple. 3 ingredients. Shortbread cookies, coconut macaroons, oatmeal, banana cookies, almond flour cookies, Nutella cookies. Yeah, I think more cookie ideas. So I think you put this in, they'll keep going. Okay, so chocolate chip cookies, flourless chocolate cookies, pumpkin. Yeah, so you get the idea here. Is AI is a really handy tool for doing things like this, where it'll give you ideas. You have to sanity check everything that AI tells you, because it'll give you some weird stuff sometimes. It's not without its faults or distortions. And so make sure that what it's saying is accurate. This one seems pretty crazy. It's only peanut butter, sugar, and egg. I guess that might work. I don't know. Maybe take what it says here, and then type it into Google and make sure that that's real. That's what I'm saying, is you really need to make sure that what AI is telling you, like a Chat GPT, actually makes sense. It doesn't need, it's usually pretty good, but it can give you some weird things, so that's one way to come up with ideas. I really like that. Or just Google search, and go through. The problem with Google searching recipes a lot of times is that the recipe pages are just absolutely flooded with annoying advertisements and pop-ups and things like that. And so it can be a real nightmare to try and sift through those. I mean, it's not that bad, but those are pretty clunky and disorganized web pages, I find, most of the time. So okay, so with that said, anyway, you're going to pick a different cookie other than sugar cookies. Don't just match exactly what I have. Be creative, do your own. Keep the ingredients to 7 or less, and have some fun with it. Okay, pick the cookies that you kind of like. Maybe that'd be a fun way to sort of do it. And maybe even if you make the real cookies, bring some into class so we can see that they actually are real. That might be fun. So anyway. Actually, I don't know what the school's rules are about serving, food in class or whatever. But I guess it does say in the classrooms no food or drink. So maybe we'll have to eat them out in the cafeteria or something, or the main common area. But anyway, okay. So try to make it something that you're interested in. Is my point anyway, and cookies that you might actually like to make. So okay, I'm gonna click back over to the template spreadsheet here, and we'll keep working through our analysis. Okay, so now we're back onto our Excel analysis, and so from our recipe here, like I just showed, we could use AI to come up with recipes. That's kind of an interesting way to use it. And then I've already got my recipe here, so this is what we're going to be going off of, right? We just put this information all in here. We've analyzed it down to a per cookie amount, and then multiplied it up to a total for 12,000 cookies, which we need to make 500 packages, basically, right? And so now this is our recipe, so it's the recipe section, and then shopping lists, cost calculation. So now I'm just going to link over to the ingredients and just drag that down. So we're just pulling the ingredients over. And here in these sections, and a lot of these sections in this part of the analysis, especially these ones here, and then this one have a spot for the amounts and then the units. And so I'll show you an example of what that looks like. But let's walk through the process here of, doing some analysis. And we can again use ChatGPT or some other AI tool to help us with this process of figuring out conversions and purchase costs as well. Again, with the warning at all times that sanity checking what AI is telling you is an important thing to do, and don't just take what it says without question, right? Okay, so what we're going to do is basically link in the amounts needed per recipe. So again, we can just kind of link over there. One thing I think it'll do a little funny if you just, oh no, that works okay. Okay, we can just drag that down then. So we're just pulling in all the amounts. Again, we're just carrying data over. If you want to design a spreadsheet that's a little more, that's different in some way, feel free. This is just my version and kind of something that looks aesthetically well organized to me, the way that I like to look at spreadsheets and whatnot. But you don't necessarily need to keep putting the ingredients in. You might look at that and think, oh, that's wasted space or something. But for me, I like to carry this stuff through, and just the way I'm doing it. So if you want to follow along, that's great. Okay. So here we've got amounts needed per recipe. So here's our check figure. Like I said, I want to make sure that the amounts that we noted over here carried over correctly. And so I've summarized them in both the spots where they show up. And then I'm just going to subtract one from the other. And you can kind of eyeball it and see, but I like to have that actual this minus this. And if they're the same thing, that should be 0. And actually the way I designed it, I guess. Whoops, let me do this. I'll fix this in the template. This is what should be 0, the difference between the two. In other words, they should be the same amount, right? So we want to make sure we didn't mess up somehow taking our recipe over to our conversion section here. And that proves that we didn't. Same amounts. So we're looking good. Okay, now let's convert to sales units, right? So what that means, right, is that you can't go to the store and say, hey, store clerk, I need to buy 1,375 cups of flour, right? Flour is not necessarily sold by the cup. And so what we need to do is to figure out what's an efficient way to buy this much flour, right? Which is a pretty significant amount, given that we are, preparing so many cookies, right? Okay, so here is where I've used, I have a note here. Consider using ChatGPT or other AI tool to convert the needed amount per recipe into the best way to buy and store. That's kind of what I had noted there. And so I'm going to click back over to the AI ChatGPT window here in a moment. But remember that what we're going to be looking at here is from the recipe telling us, based on recipe amounts, that we need 1,375 cups of all-purpose flour. Okay, and so we're going to click over to ChatGPT and see if it can help us figure out what's a good way to buy that much flour. Okay, so I will now click over there. All right, so now we're back onto our ChatGPT page. It's got all the stuff we were just searching for, but that's fine. We're going to start kind of a new search. So you just type in here. That's how ChatGPT works. So what I'm going to type in then is, what is the, I'll just say, what is the best way? AI is usually pretty good at interpreting your intention, but what is the best way to buy 1,375 cups of all-purpose flour? And you can see how fast it responds. It's pretty wild. So buying 1,375 cups of all-purpose flour is a large bulk scale purchase. That's over 430 pounds of flour. So we kind of need to, again, sanity check things, but that is a lot of flour. We are making 12,000 cookies, so okay. So step one, and it's doing the math for us, which is awesome. So it says 1 cup of all-purpose flour weighs approximately 4.5 ounces. 1,375 cups, which is 1 cup is 4 ounces. So this many cups times those ounces equals that total ounces, and then if they divide it down, you get about 386.7 pounds. Okay, so what we need is 386.7 pounds. All right, I'm going to click back over to the spreadsheet and show you where to put that in now. Okay, so we're back in the spreadsheet. So we've now used the AI to tell us that we need, if we need, it's telling us per the recipe, we need 1,375 cups. That means that we need 386.7 pounds, right? So now we're converting it to sales units, or units that is more what you're going to be able to buy, right? Versus cups, we need pounds. And then we're going to look at what's a standard amount, because you're not going to be able to go to the store and say, hey, can you sell me a 386.70 pound bag of all-purpose flour, right? That's not how it's sold. So we need to figure out how many standard sales units in the standard amount of weight you buy. Maybe it's 40 pounds, 50-pound bags of flour. How many of those you need to buy, essentially. So I'm going to click back over to ChatGPT and use that again to help us do some of that amount. Okay, so now we're back on the ChatGPT, and it's got, so here, that's what we were just saying. We put our amount in, so 386.7 pounds of flour is what we need. And for that amount, okay, and they're saying to round up for spillage or measurement, plan for 400 to 450 pounds of flour, right? So keep that in mind. And then here's the bulk sizes that typically are sold. So, and it tells you kind of best option. See if you can find a 50-pound bag, right? We would need approximately 9 bags, which would account for spillage. So if we had 9 bags times 50 pounds, that'd be 450 pounds. We only need 386.7. So it depends how comfortable you are, with getting close to the amount you need. But to have enough left over, we probably should go for the bigger purchase. I think that's a pretty good idea. So now, 50-pound bags are what we're going to buy. So, or that's a standard sales unit. So I'm going to click back over to my spreadsheet now. Okay, so now we're back to the spreadsheet, and we're going to go through and say, okay, sorry, I just had a little glitch on my video recording there, but okay, we're back. So now standard sales unit, that's what we just figured out was 50 pounds is the one that makes the most sense, I think, for us. The more you buy, you usually get a better price. So we need a lot. So that makes sense for us to get 9 50-pound bags, basically, is what we were shooting for. You could make do with 8, right? But you'd be a little bit close. So let's go for 9. And again, this comes down to your specific recipe, right? You might cut things close. And then if you do cut things close, maybe mention that in your analysis, and maybe talk about whether you had enough or you didn't, or you had too much. That's kind of fun stuff to include. And again, that's just kind of the creative writing part. So 50-pound bags, 9 times 50 is 450 pounds. That's plenty that we need to get 1,375 cups. 450 pounds is quite a bit more than our needed 386.7, but that gives us a buffer if we have some spillage, like it said. So we'll go with that. Plus, let's look at how much the price is. That might influence our decision whether we want to cut it really close or stay more, stay closer to the actual amount, or to have some extra buffer, basically, right? So, okay, so now we need to figure out what does it cost for a 50-pound bag of flour, right? That's kind of the next important thing we need to figure out. So I'm going to click over and just do a Google search. You can use ChatGPT to try and come up with amounts, but I would recommend, and let's try that actually real quick. Let me go over to ChatGPT, and then we'll do that. And then we'll do a Google search as well. I think there's some value in sanity checking, because again, you can get weird results from ChatGPT, but sometimes it has links you can follow, or from another AI tool. So let's take a look at the ChatGPT response, and then let's take a look at a Google response as well, with a direct pricing from something like Walmart or Amazon or another, if we're buying 50-pound bags, that might be coming from like a bulk, wholesale type of supplier. So, okay. But like I said, first we'll go to ChatGPT, see what it tells us, and then we'll go to Google and do a. Okay. So now we're back here, and let's see if it even told us already where to buy. So it did kind of like give us some places, some suggestions. So we could Google search, these places. We could add that if we want to help with our Google search, Costco, Walmart.com. We'll take a look at that later. But let's just ask ChatGPT directly, what is the price for a 50-pound bag? Bag of all-purpose flour. And it'll search the web kind of for you, bring back some results. And it usually does give you the links outwards too, so that is handy. So the price of a 50-pound bag varies based on brand, quality, supplier. Here's some options, right? So we've got this supplier. It kind of gives you some detail too. It aggregates some information. Again, you can't trust everything that AI is giving you necessarily, but it's a good starting point for sure, if nothing else. And so here's some options, right? You can really see they do kind of vary. Here's a $30 bag. Here's organic flour, is about $100. All-purpose, whatever this one is $28.99. $31, $34. So they different suppliers and all that kind of stuff. Cool. So now that we have this sort of as a data point, let's go ahead and open up Google and do the same thing. Let's see, what does a 50-pound bag of all-purpose flour cost? Okay, so 50 pounds of flour. So again, you can kind of look through. Look, it's pulling in a lot of similar, links, which you kind of expect anyway. $34.97, $69. And so again, this is where you get to be creative, right? If you want to purchase it from a certain supplier because it's organic, maybe you can include that into your analysis. So up to you, how you do this project and what you figure out. But all bulk foods, 33. So good if you can find a good deal. All-purpose flour. This one's got some ratings. ADM all-purpose flour, yada, yada, yada. Instacart, $15.99. I'm going to make sure it really is 50 pounds. I feel like, oh yeah, that one's 50 pounds. Okay, Smart and Final. There you go, $15.99. I mean, that's a cheap price. So when you find your pricing, take a screenshot or write it in somewhere in the project as well. I'll actually make a separate tab in the Excel that will say pricing screenshots. So once you find and you price your item, go ahead and take a snip or a screenshot, which is basically a snip is a screenshot. It's just like a portion of it. But go ahead and paste that in so you have it in your Excel, and then that'll be there. I'll show you where. Let me click over to the Excel so you can see where I put it. So here you can see I just pasted that little snip screenshot in. So $15.99. So then we come back to our pricing, and we're going to say cost per standard, 50-pound bag, $15.99. Pretty cool. Easier if we just said 16, but that's fine. There is sales tax that might come into play and all that kind of stuff too with this project. You can just ignore that. Some of it, we're having fun with this thing. It doesn't have to be so accurate, but do keep that in mind in the future. That if you're really doing this project, there are always some unforeseen, maybe there's shipping expenses too, right? We're not counting that either. We're just going off, and that's fine. That's as much as you need, is just getting a price there. Okay, so now that we're talking about flour, we're buying 50-pound bags. We are going to have 9 units to purchase, and so that comes out to about $143.91, or exactly $143.91. And then I've got this spot here to say residual unused amount. And so basically what we can do here, and I'll put the little formula in for you all so you can see how to like calculate this basically. What we're saying is what we got was 9 times 50 pounds, right? So that would be 450 pounds that we purchased minus what we're going to use. And so then we have a leftover of 63.3 pounds, which is quite a bit. And so when you go to month 2, right, because we're looking at, or sorry, not month, but game 1, we're going to use that. We're only going to use this much potentially, or maybe you use 400. You can, again, kind of update this based on your analysis. So if you have 50 pounds left over, maybe you only need to buy 8 the next time, right? So those are the kind of things to sort of just think through. Again, this is a creative writing and creative analysis project. You do you, but keep in mind all of the real outcomes here. So just you can carry that over. And so residual unused after you bake all your cookies, you have 63 pounds, assuming you have no waste, right? That's the whole thing about being close or not. It's you might have some spillage and some other types of waste or something, right? So free thinking, creative project again. So think about that. That's great. Okay, so that's cool. We've got our pricing screenshot, so on and so forth. And so you're just going to follow that same process more or less for all of the different items, and be sure to put in your screenshots for each one. Use your AI like I just showed you to kind of do conversions. At the same time, it wouldn't be a bad idea to check and make sure that AI telling you that 1,375 cups of all-purpose flour is correctly 386.7 pounds. At least should be close, And so you can do one of those conversion calculators to sort of sanity check, just to make sure it's reasonable. A reasonableness check, right? It's another way to say that. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to go ahead and just populate the rest of this here off screen. So I'm not going to run through this process because it does take you a while. That's why you want to limit your number of ingredients so you don't have too many, because it does take a while to go between, Google searching prices, converting all of the stuff, but, with the AI, it really is a lot quicker than it maybe would be otherwise if you were doing it more manually. So yeah, hopefully that's a cool way for you to sort of get an introduction to AI too and play around with it in a handy way. This is kind of realistic. If you were doing something similar and making a bunch of cookies for Christmas or for a family get together or something, feel free to use this spreadsheet in the future if you want to actually use it. Actually, let me know how it goes and if it actually works. I'd be curious to know. You don't need to be making 12,000 cookies, but if you're making 100 or 200 or 150 or something, you could really use something like this to do the calculations and then to price it all out and find the best way, the most practical way to buy the ingredients. So pretty cool. I like this project a lot. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to off screen populate the rest of this, and then I'll come back with all this filled out and we'll kind of finish things up. Okay, so now I've gone through and basically just filled out all the rest of the information, doing all those conversions. This will take you a little while, plan for it to take you at least an hour or two. Probably an hour is fine, but going through, doing the AI analysis to figure out how to convert the recipe quantity to the sales units, so teaspoons. Typically it's sold in 8-ounce, baking soda is sold in 8-ounce packages, so 50 teaspoons would be 80 ounces. It's $1.69 per 8 ounces. You need 10 of those 80 to meet the total amount needed, and then multiply by the $1.69 per box, and you get $16.90 total. So that's your formula, is just the quantity needed, standard purchase units times the price. For example, another instance, we need 500 eggs. Converting that, dividing that by a dozen, means we need 41.67 dozen, which, that doesn't really work very well. So we might have some leftovers. That's kind of the whole thing, right? So, because when we're purchasing, we're 41.67, you can buy 5 dozen you can buy a thing from, I forget where I saw this from, maybe it was Costco or something, but you do that Google search and you see, oh, you can buy a 5 dozen thing of eggs. You'll have 5 dozen eggs in a package, and the cost for that was $19.39. And then we're going to need 9 times 5, which is going to get us 5 dozen. So let's see how many is that's 45 dozen, and so we only need 41.67 dozen. So we're going to have some leftovers, and that's where you get we'll have 3.33 dozen. If we were to divide that by 12, or sorry, times that by 12, that means we have 40 eggs left over. So again, you can kind of build in either, make it funny. What did you do with the leftover eggs? Maybe you could start a egg foo young business on the side, or scrambled eggs or something, or I don't know. Use your imagination again with the leftover ingredients. A more efficient and practical way would be to save those if you can, and then reuse them in the future. So we need 500 eggs, and so over the whole project, if we kept buying this amount, we'd have 200 extra eggs. So we'd be able to bring this down a little bit. So factor that in if you can reuse ingredients and figure out what that comes out to. So that's what our residual unused represents. So then we can just sum up the total cost for buying all this stuff. Unsalted butter, for example, that was kind of a funny one. It comes in these 55-pound boxes that you can buy in bulk, and each box found for $193.75. And then you need 250 pounds, so you're going to get 5 of these 55-pound boxes, which is going to cost you almost $1,000, and you're going to have a leftover of 25 pounds after you have, basically like half of one box is going to be left over, right? So again, you can carry this forward and use it to reduce the amount you would need to buy. Maybe you only need to buy 4 boxes instead of 5 in the future, right? Because you have leftovers. So I'll leave that up to you all. It all depends on what cookie you have, your ingredients, how much it takes, so that's very driven by your whole individual analysis, okay? So once you get this all filled out, basically what we're saying is the total cost of all these ingredients is, in our example here with our ingredients, at the weights that they're sold in, or the quantities they're sold in, times the price that we found online, times the amount that we actually need for those individual boxes. How many of these 14 25-pound bags of sugar, and you might be able to find better 50, maybe there's 50-pound bags of sugar, which would make more sense. So keep researching, get it as cost efficient as you can. That'd be cool. But again, this project's just more about doing this kind of work in the real world. It's sort of fun. Okay, so if it costs us $2,587 exactly, that's funny that it all added up to a round number. Now we know what our cost of raw materials or direct materials is. So now we can come back to our summary and budget, and then we can go through and say, okay, if we're selling price is $9.40, right? We're going to sell how many packages? Not 500, right? We're going to sell 480 because we're estimating, 4% is going to be unsold. So we're going to get $4,512 from that sale. Okay. And if we wanted to, we could just do a formula. If we want to have it, again, this is creative, be creative. But if you're selling the same amount every time, you could just do a formula that pulls in the cell next to it. And then you really only have to link the first one to be $9.40 per package times the 480 packages sold. And then you could just do a summation formula there. So in total, we're planning to earn $22,560 over the 5 games. And now let's figure out what our expenses are, right? So our direct materials, our ingredients, that's what we just did, was $2,587. So our packaging material costs here, and I lined these up again to kind of make it easy to see where the information is coming from. So the scenario told us it was 15 cents per package for the materials, and how many packages? It's going to be 500, right? This one we don't want to, here we're multiplying by the number sold, but we're going to package all of them. So we're taking the 15 cents times the 500 there. Again, if that's going to be the same every time, we can just do a formula that equals the cell next to it, so it's the same, and then we can copy this down. So that's just summarizing, the totals. So this is the total from all the games. Okay, the direct labor cost here, again, I came up with 16 hours per employee. There's 2 employees, and those employees are paid $16.50 a piece, so $528 per baking session. And here's a way to do this formula too, where if you just want to get this same thing to carry across, we've already got that same thing here basically, so you could highlight those cells and just drag them down, and then it will update the formula to just pull in what's at the side. And same thing we could do here, we just drag that down basically. And really we could just drag this formula all the way down if we want, because then it'll just auto populate as we go. Okay, so baking utensils and supplies, that's just a one-time purchase, so we'll just put that on the beginning. In our first, hopefully we cover our costs in the first game here. And then kitchen rental fee is just $85 per game. And remember, there's no additional cost because it's a one-time, the baking utensils and stuff, we only purchase that once. I'm going to go here and copy these cells, and I'm going to paste that formula in. So I'm just carrying across the same amount every time again. Cleanup fee is just $55 per game. Again, I'm going to just drag that down. Same each game. Now the student commissions are based on the number sold, but it's based on the number that the students are selling. So 25 cents times 240 packages. So we're going to pay the students $60 every game. And feel free to modify this if you want to say, oh, then the student didn't show up, and the students didn't show up, or they sold more, or they sold less, or we stopped letting the students sell them because they were eating all the cookies, or I don't know, something, make it fun. But for my purposes, I'm just doing the same. And then the same thing here is going to stand for the advertising cost being the same every game. So then we're just going to add all these up. So I just do a summation formula. We just drag that across, make sure it's adding all the amounts, and it is. So our total costs, we got to figure out the materials and ingredients. So this is where it really comes into play. So we got the first game, but again, this is where we got to think about leftovers, right? So if we have 25 pounds, or let's see, if we have 34 pounds of leftovers from the first time, maybe we can buy less the second time, right? So like, for example, baking powder, but it's such a small dollar amount per box, I'm not even going to try to figure that one out. But for something like butter, where you have 500, you have 25 pounds of butter, so that's almost half a box. So you don't have enough to reduce your purchase by a whole 55 pounds the first time, but definitely by the third time you could reduce the amount of butter you need to buy by one. The butter's almost $200, so maybe the second game has the same cost, right? But then maybe the third game, then we can take that same cost and subtract out one of the butter purchases. We don't need 4 anymore, we just need 5. So we can just subtract off the cost of one of those, so it's a little cheaper in the third game. So go through and do that sort of analysis and figure out how it can be a little cheaper, and the same thing can be said for other ingredients too. So if we have 34.7 unused pounds of flour, then we could reduce, our second time we're done, keep losing my thing. The second time through, or again, kind of like the third time, we might be able to back that out. So it's $16. Again, it really comes down to, is it a high-priced item? Does it make sense to try and save costs by reusing? Definitely for the butter here, because it's so expensive, that makes sense from my perspective. But I'll let you all figure out, the details on that. But just have some fun with it. Try to get it to make sense. And include that in your analysis too. Did you reuse? Did you sell the excess ingredients? I got silly with mine. So, don't feel like it's got to be some serious thing. Just have fun with it. But if you have leftovers, talk about what you did with the residual unused amount, basically. Okay, and then to get net income, so we've totaled up all our expenses. In total, $18,226.25 for the 5 games. Your net income is just your revenue minus your total expenses. Carry that across, so the formula just keeps updating. And then, you're just going to add a summation across, or you could do the same formula. This minus total revenues minus total expenses comes out to $4,333.75 for what I just went through and input. So there you go. So this would be the completed. You got all your pricing screenshots. Excuse me. You've got all your analysis done. Jeez, sorry. You know what all your residual amounts are. You kind of got this all dialed in. You've gone through and analyzed. You might need different numbers here for the amount of time and labor per employee. Maybe it only takes, if it's just peanut butter and sugar and an egg, and that's your cookies, maybe that takes some less time, right? There's not so much mixing and baking and packaging to do or something. So again, be creative with it. Be realistic to some degree, but have fun with it. Maybe you have more employees, maybe you have less employees, maybe you're paying them, a certain amount or something. But in general, what I came up with was 2 days of 8 hours of full-time work to package 12,000 cookies, basically. To mix, bake, and package all those cookies into 500 packages takes 2 people, 2 full days is what I came up with. And I'm not, make it somewhat realistic, but it's not like we're going to try and actually put this into practice, right? So at the same time of being realistic and reasonable, make it fun. And have some fun with it. Be creative, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And not so creative that it's completely unrealistic, but do be creative and give it some thought. So, okay, so this is the whole spreadsheet part of it all finished essentially. Once you get here, you've got multiple screenshots. You'll have a screenshot for each one of your ingredients. You'll have to do all that extra work that I did off screen, figuring out the conversions and the prices and price it all out, and then finish out your revenue and your whole budget here essentially. And at that point, then you're going to come over and finish your analysis. So I'll show you briefly here. I will also upload an example analysis that I created, and let's take a quick look at that now, and it'll be something that you can reference just to help you, get pushed in the right direction. Okay, so now the analysis is going to be done in Word. And so I've got my little example analysis pulled up. Have some fun with it. I use ChatGPT to kind of come up with funny little puns or names, so feel free to use ChatGPT that way or another AI tool just to help you be creative, right? Again, don't just slap the instructions in ChatGPT and say, hey, do my whole project for me. But if you're looking for a catchy title, maybe you could put into AI like, hey, I need a catchy title for an analysis related to a cookie bake sale. I'll give you a whole bunch of options basically. So I think it's a good tool that way. So I called it Bake My Day, an analysis of the cookie fundraiser, prepared by me, prepared for. So you could kind of steal the way I laid this out, my format at least, and all that. I included a funny little go ahead bake my day cookie little meme there on the cover as a fun thing for the title page. You don't have to do anything. There's no real strict requirements in terms of what the design should be for the analysis, but be creative and fun and add something a little extra. Like I said, 10% of the report is making it fun and above, outstanding essentially. So do all that. And so I just wrote this whole write up here. It's basically just 2 full pages of writing. I made it kind of fun. I said I hired 2 employees, one named Tina Chip and her brother Crumbly Johnson to do the majority of the baking and packaging for us. I talked about how I helped out to limit the time needed. That kept us to our 2 days, kind of, what we had in our analysis. It takes 16 hours. Tina and Chip each working 16 hours over the whole 2 days. But I said, but I also helped to make sure that we stayed to the 16 hours. And then I made a suggestion of seeking additional volunteers from the baking club in the future to further reduce costs. So include suggestions for improvement in the future, right? And again, this is completely creative and use your imagination. I said we were raising money to go to Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. That's why we're doing the bake sale. We've got those 2 employees. So I'm incorporating all of the elements that we use in our Excel spreadsheet, the price, the amount of cookies, all that kind of stuff. But then, elaborating and being creative and writing up kind of in a scenario about how the whole project, when I bought the packaging supplies from Cookies R Us, they went out of business. So next year you'll need to find a new store to purchase those from. I left the utensils in the storage room, so maybe you won't have to repurchase. So again, just get creative with it. There's no real place where it says this is what it has to be, but you can just be imaginative here. yeah, so I pretty much just laid out all the specific components. We talk about having the alumni and the student volunteers and how they're being paid or not paid, how they're splitting them up for the sales. So basically just taking the scenario and all the components and really fleshing it out into a written analysis. Pretend you're talking to the club advisor and the next year's manager, and you're giving suggestions on how the project, you're describing how the project went, again, out of your imagination, but based on the actual details that we just analyzed, and then also talking about improvements that can be done in the future, basically. So I'll have this available on Canvas. You all can take a look at what I came up with. Again, it's a protected PDF, so you can't copy out of it or print it off or anything. But so you'll have to do your own work. You can't just take mine, put it in AI, and say, hey, change this a little bit. Don't be lazy with AI that way. You still have to really actually put some thought and effort and originality into this. But use AI where you can if you need to think of funny names or come up with ideas for how to structure it. You can make it more serious too. Mine was pretty silly, but you could make it more serious. You could design it in a different way with specific sections broken out, in terms of project overview and ingredients and how that went, and labor and why you decided or how you came up with the amount of time, all that kind of stuff. So it's very free form. Generally speaking, all the information needs to be in here, but the way you approach this, there's no super strict guidelines. I mean, having something, you need 1,000 pages, you need a title page, you need to write, all the things that are in the instructions, make sure that you capture and make sure that you touch on all of the specific components of the project, from the scenario and the numbers and all that kind of stuff. But have some fun with it and be creative. And and then when you're finished, you will turn in both the Word and the Excel document. You upload those directly to Canvas, and I will take a look and look at the grading rubric. That will guide you in terms of where the points are coming from. Reach out to me if you have any questions. Hopefully the template and the examples will give you enough guidance to get going, and this video also to show you how to use the template. And I hope you have fun with the project. I think this is a cool foray into the real world of using some of the types of information that and techniques that we've developed this semester from a managerial perspective to see, wait, what does this thing cost? Are we charging high enough? Maybe your cookies, when you go through, you find out the ingredients are really expensive, and so $9.40 isn't going to cut it, and you're going to have to change the price, and talk about why you did that or what effect that had on the percentage sold. You could play around with it in all different kinds of ways, but just make sure it's internally consistent, and the outcome is following through any changes that you made. But have some fun with it. Hopefully it's a fun project and kind of makes things come to life a little bit in terms of all the analysis that we were doing. And let me know if you have any questions. Hopefully this was sufficient to give you guys enough of an overview to allow you to proceed, and I look forward to seeing your projects. All right, thanks everyone.